Okay, so let's go ahead and clean up the code a bit and also try to make sure that we fill in the methods that we have written in our part one. So first thing first, some of the times that you name variables for the very first time, they might be very long because you're trying to keep them descriptive and everything else, but they might be very long because you are trying to make them descriptive. But later on when you look at them, you're like, actually that is a bit too lengthy. In this case, I think it is. So we can actually just say continue decision, and that would make sense instead of just repeating word unscramble again and again. So we can just say control RR and then change all of the variables at once. So let's go ahead and change this to continue decision. Much better and much shorter, right? So this is great. And as I said, we can actually even do this because that way you can see what's going on as opposed to having your eyes go towards the right just for this one line. You can have them in both ways. It's honestly a matter of preference. I just now prefer it like this as I look at it again. And this is just what code cleanup is going to look like. You're just going to go over your code and make sure that you write the things that make sense to you the most. So the messages we will rewrite a little later. I think the next thing to do would be to fill in these methods that we wrote. First, I will be working on the execute scrambled word manual entry scenario. So let's go ahead and do that. I will first say, let's declare a variable and say manual input, and then say console readline, and basically say string empty if the user doesn't give us anything. Just have a default value there, and then say scrambled words equals manual input. Since manual input is a string, it has methods available on it, as you remember, and one of the methods is split, and split will take a character and then split your string based on that. In this case, I want to split it by a comma because it's going to be comma separated. Then I will actually make up another method. I will say display matched unscrambled words. And this doesn't exist, as you've already guessed. I'm just making this so that then I can go ahead and fill it in just like I'm doing it with these guys. So it says display matched unscrambled words. Great. And you can just generate it for now. Take that out, put it on the bottom, just make it better organized that way. And we're basically done with our manual entry. The second one, which is for the file scenario, it's going to be very similar to this. We're going to basically say file name. In this case, our input from the user is going to be the file name, as you remember from the flowchart. And then we're going to have the same type of deal. However, our scrambled words are not going to be split, but they're going to be gotten from a file. So I will say file reader dot read file name. Once again, this is not something that we have currently, but we will be creating this later down the line. I'm just creating it for myself to know and to remind myself that, oh, I need to create this. And then we can use the same method again because we have gotten the scrambled words. Whether we get it manually or we get it through a file doesn't matter, because then later we can go ahead and match them up. So now things are looking a lot better. Now I will say this. Let's go ahead and fill out this method, which is pretty much our last method that we need. So I will say string word list. Now guess what this is going to be? Yes, this is going to be our word list, because once we have the scrambled words either manually or through a file, then we have to load the word list to be able to match them up, right? To unscramble the words. I will use the same file reader, which does not exist yet. And I will say, okay, well now load the word list. And the word list is basically going to be a variable that I also don't have. So I'm kind of like just loaning all these variable names and file names and everything else, which I don't have, but later on I will be creating them. And you know, this is just that. It's just a name, and then I'm going to create it later. So now that we can assume we have the word list, I will say, okay, well now say matched words. And I can actually go ahead and say a list of matched word instead of a var, so it's a lot clearer as to what it is. And I will go over it in a minute. Just stick with it. If you are confused, I totally understand, but don't be discouraged. Just keep writing this. It'll all make sense in a little bit. And I will say match. And basically, here is what I did. I said, listen, I'm going to assume that I have this new custom type, which is called matched word, and that is going to be a list of matched words. And you know, after I have the word list and I have the scrambled words, I'm basically going to pass it to another class that has a method on it, or an object instance that has a method on it, match, which also doesn't exist. And that is going to take scrambled words and it's going to take the word list. And it's going to put them together. How? I don't know yet because I haven't created it, but it will at one point. So then I'm going to say, okay, well now I have it. And the list also has a method available on it. And that is called any. So I can say if the list has anything in it, then do something. Otherwise, do something else. We already know what we need to do if there is nothing, right? We just say no matches have been found. So we're basically going to say just that. No matches have been found. And if there have been any matches, then we're going to use what? Exactly, a for each loop, as you've already learned, to be able to go through a list from beginning to the end. And we're going to say var matched word, which is just a variable name, could be anything else, but in this case it makes sense to say matched word. And then we're going to say in matched words. And guess what? We're going to go ahead and print the whole thing. And we're going to say match found for scrambled word, and that scrambled word will have an unscrambled word. And I'm imagining that this matched word custom type right here, it will have two things on it. It will have two properties on it. One called scrambled word, and another one called just a word, which is going to be the word from the word list. And that should do it. So we have a rough draft of the whole thing. Yes, of course, we still need to fill out a bunch of other things, and we need to create all these classes and methods, but this is the skeleton. Actually, there's a few more things that we need to add, so let's go ahead and add those before moving forward. First thing first, let me go ahead and grab the word list, file name, and let me actually create this. So above your static void, so above your method that is, you will declare a constant saying it is a string, name is that, and the value is just a string, and it's going to be word list, or anything that your word list file name is, right? So now we have this one finished up. See? First we created it in our minds, imagined that it is something that exists, and then afterwards we created it for real. And that is actually a very good way to go about it. Now we need two other things, the file reader and the word matcher. Let's go ahead and create those as well, just the empty shells of them, and then we will go ahead and finish up filling them out. So I will say private static read only file reader. Once again, it does not exist, so it doesn't know what I'm talking about. It's underlining it red, it's going all crazy, but that's okay because we know we will be creating it afterwards, just like we did with the word list file name. And then I will basically do the same thing for word matcher. Okay. And you might be asking, why didn't I use constant and I use static read only? Well, that's because you remember that const only can be assigned. You can only assign built-in types, built-in C# types to to the const. So this is my custom type. I cannot do that. So I need to use read-only, but since I'm in a static method, I actually need to use static so that I can access this. So now that we have this structure down, and let's go ahead, see, okay, so it's recognizing it and saying, okay, well that's what you want. And now we're going to go ahead and just actually create new files for them. So we'll go ahead and say, create a folder. I might rename it later, but for now I'll just call it workers. Workers. You can call it anything else you want. Just makes sense to have workers. It's a common name. And I will say create a C# class, and I will name it file reader. Great. One down. And if you hover over it, it'll say using Word Unscrambler workers. Just do that, and that easily you have done it. Same thing with the word matcher. Let's go ahead and do that. We've done it once. This is twice. That's it. Create the name for it. Word matcher. Wonderful. And since we're already using the workers, it'll recognize it and fill it in. And once again, see, this is a mistake. This is why you don't really want to copy and paste all the time, because you will make mistakes like this. This actually needs to be word matcher. Great. So now we have all this stuff filled in. Let's see what we're missing so far. We can actually take these out because they're unused since they're grayed out. File reader, word matcher, obviously we don't have the methods within them. So it's no longer underlining the file reader because that exists. And now it's underlining the methods. So what we can do actually is hover over them and say generate method. See? It'll do it for you. And now if you actually press F12 on it, it'll go inside. Once again, it created the method. We might not need the internal, which is an access specifier, and the structure will change obviously, but it's a good start, right? It's a good start. Instead of you writing it, it does it for you, and then you can change things around it. So you can do that as well. You create the match, and not a lot of things are underlined. The only thing that's underlined is actually just the matched word, which we can go ahead and create as well. So I will go to Solution Explorer and right click, create a folder, say data, and create another class called matched word. There you go. And you can hover over it, say using Word Unscrambler data. What that allows you to do is once again to import your own library that you have just written. And you've already done that with workers, and now you're doing it with the data. But we have still one problem, or actually two problems. First, the matched word does not have scrambled word or word on it. Though it exists, it doesn't have these properties on it. The other thing is that the word matcher match, if we go into it, so click F12 on the match, you'll see that it's underlined because in here it does not know what matched word is. So once again, we just need to import it, right? We need to use that namespace in order to recognize what matched word is. So now if we go back, you'll see it's not underlined anymore. So this makes sense to it. So now things are pretty much in place. The only thing that we need to do is change up our matched word. So let's go into it. And here's the thing. First, let's change this from a class to a struct. So the reason why we're doing that is because remember what structs were? They looked like classes, but they were value types, and they were for us to categorize variables together that made sense. And in this case, that's exactly what it is. We're trying to categorize variables that make sense. So we have two properties in this case. And once again, we'll be going over properties a little later, but for now, just know that they are variables that allow us to store data. That's all. And I will have one that is public string, and it's called scrambled word. And I will say that one can set this and also, they can retrieve it and also modify it. And I will have another property called just word, and that should do it. Now we can actually get rid of the whole thing because we're not using any other libraries here. So this is great. And if you come here, now scrambled word and word are no longer underlined. So let's scroll up and let's look at the whole structure once more. We see we have our file reader word matcher, which we still need to fill out. We have our word list, and then we are starting the program. So this is the entry point into our application. We're asking for the manual or file input, just like in the flowchart. We're making our decision if it's manual or if it's a file name. Based on that, we execute a scenario, and after that, we're asking the user whether they want to continue, and then we either continue or we stop. For our manual entry, we are splitting it based on commas. For our file, we are reading it from a file and putting it both in an array of strings and passing it on to our method, a helper method that's display matched on scrambled words. This will take our scrambled words and then load the word list just like in the flowchart and say if there were any matched words, then go through them and show them one by one. For every scrambled word, show its matched word. And if there are no matches, then just say there are no matches. So this pretty much is our skeleton. Now, in the later videos, we'll be going around either refactoring some of the code in our program or writing the rest of the classes that we have created but did not fill out currently.